Welcome back to the Outreach Project family. This is Josh.
This is Zach.
And we are joined today with
Ryan.
Hello, Ryan.
Yeah, good to see you guys.
Yeah, so last episode, our guest Seth Hicks called you out, and now you're here.
He predicted I would say yes, and I guess, here I am, so it worked out.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Really excited to get to know who you are more and
Yeah.
hear your story. Do you mind starting off with maybe just an introduction, who you are, what you do, whatnot?
Yeah. Can I start with some prayer first?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Lord, I just want to invite you into our time here. We're all members of the same church, and we're members of the greater church in the world. And we love you so much, Lord. We want the church to be close. We want people to know each other. And I am just so thankful for how this podcast is doing that. And it's just a pleasure to see guys like these two and the ones that helped them to put this together, to really just be pursuing your kingdom and pursuing what you want them to do in their lives. And so I just really appreciate that and pray this time would bless you and bring glory to you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. That was awesome. That's first on our on our show.
Oh, okay. All right.
Love it.
I get in the habit of praying like toward the beginning of a meeting or the end of a meeting from a lot of church meetings. And there was one time at work where I was like this close to like, okay, let's bow our heads. But my work is not at a church, so that would have been very awkward if I had done that.
Yeah.
But it just feels natural sometimes.
Yeah.
So intro, my name is Ryan Ward. I am married to Heather Ward. And actually our 25th wedding anniversary is in a week, in a couple days.
Oh,
so
congrats.
A week and a day. Yeah. So it's coming right up.
Congratulations.
Yeah. We have 4 kids. The oldest is Lila. She's 19 and just finished her first year in college. Then we have Ava, who's 17, Sadie, who's 15, and Silas, who's 14. So 4 kids total. I work at Zimmer Biomet. So I've worked at Zimmer Biomet for about 18 years now, ever since Heather and I moved back to Columbia City from being away for a while. I'm a mechanical engineer by background, and so I design medical devices over the course of time, different ones. But yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, sweet. And you and Heather grew up here?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a kind of a funny thing. I know I was listening to Seth's podcast, and he talked about meeting Elijah when he was very young. Well, I met Heather for the first time when she moved to Columbia City. I had grown up here my whole life, and she came when we were starting 5th grade. So she was a new student in 5th grade in Thorn Creek.
In your
school.
class?
In my class,
Okay.
yeah. So there is a picture we still have where we're sitting across from each other at these little 4-desk formation thing. And there we were as 5th graders. And but we didn't start dating then. We didn't start dating until quite a bit later.
It's probably a good thing.
Yeah. That'd be a long haul to make it all the way through. Whew. No. Of course she was amazing and beautiful back then, so I was infatuated, but we didn't actually start dating yet. So we didn't start dating until we were juniors in high school, and then we went to separate colleges, but we basically stayed dating the whole time. I think we broke up one time for like 4 days. But
Where'd you go to school?
So I went to Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Okay.
And she went to Asbury University in Wilmore, Kentucky, so that's just outside of Lexington. So we were about 4 hours apart during that time. And then as soon as I finished, we got married, and we lived in Lexington for the early part of our marriage.
Okay. And then when did you move back here?
We moved back to Columbia City in 2004, and we really loved living down there. We loved the church we were in. We had tons of great friends that were kind of in the same age bracket. But we were all starting families. Everyone was having kids, and we had just had Lila while we lived in Lexington. And we really prayed hard of where the Lord wanted us. And long story short, we decided we wanted to move back to Columbia City. We just have all of our extended family here. We really love it here too. So even though, there's a part of our heart that is in Lexington because it's just a beautiful place and a lot of great memories. We were there for 6.5 years about as a married couple before we moved back. But having that first child was really the deal breaker on that one because we started driving back and forth. And it was like, this is too much to be driving just to see family. So we moved back in that year.
Makes it easy too if you need someone to watch and
Oh, yeah.
help out. Yeah.
Yep. Grandparents, yeah, they watch the kids a lot over the years. Now they're old enough they don't need babysitters, but yeah, back then it was nice.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're at Zimmer now. Did you start there after school? Or
No, actually, when we were in Lexington, I worked for a printer company. So there's a printer company called Lexmark, and they're not as big now as they used to be, but they were the number 2 printer company in the U.S. when I was working there behind HP. And so it was a great job. I got to do lots of crazy things. Like right when I started, they would fly me over to Asia to work with partner companies in Taiwan and Japan. So I've been to Taiwan like 14 times or something, and Japan a few times. And then we would go to China for the factories where they would build the printers. So every year we'd start up a new one. I'd go over there. And so I've been to China quite a few times, maybe 7 or 8 times with that. And it was great. Got lots of frequent flyer miles that we could then spend on other stuff. We actually went on a mission trip one time, Heather and I, using the frequent flyer miles that I got from my job. So a really cool job. I was designing inkjet printers for that time and enjoyed it. But then when we decided to move back, I just had to switch to something else, and just looked in the area of like what's the best job I could get in the area. And obviously Warsaw is like the hub of, it's like the world's capital of orthopedic companies.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
No one would think
little
that.
Warsaw. But they sprung up over a long period of time. So yeah. So that's where I got the job. It just happened to be Zimmer that I got the job at, and then later Biomet and Zimmer merged. So
Yeah. What kind of things do you do for fun?
Well, a few things, I guess. I like to play Ultimate Frisbee a lot at lunchtime at work. We have a group that plays at Zimmer and has the whole time I've worked there. So for like 18 years now, I've been playing.
Oh, so you're pretty good now.
Pretty good.
Okay.
Pretty good. Yeah, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty good at
He's
Frisbee.
a pro.
Yeah, it's a good time. We actually had a group playing for a few years there. We would play all year round. We'd be out there like sliding on the ice and throwing the
Oh,
Frisbee.
nice.
That sounds like fun.
Is there any injuries with that?
Oh, plenty. Yeah, plenty. Don't ask my wife. She always, she rolls her eyes and she's like, I don't know what's wrong with those guys. They probably think they're younger than they are, but
That's
yeah.
okay.
A cracked rib here, a couple sprained ankles. I actually tore my ACL while playing at lunchtime at work, but it wasn't Frisbee. It was soccer I was playing. Tore the ACL.
How long ago was that?
Yeah, it was probably 8 or 9 years ago now.
Okay.
So I got it repaired and everything's fine.
You're back
So
at it.
What's the
Back
big
playing
deal?
Ultimate Frisbee.
Yeah, I just played last week, so it's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So that's one of my hobbies. I do like to read. Reading's probably my favorite hobby. You guys came in the house and saw my library, so I love reading books for fun, mostly for fun, but sometimes for educational stuff. Hardly ever for work. Usually it's some kind of Christian edification, or this year I'm doing the Bible in a year, so spending some of my reading time doing that this year. So yeah, I love to read. I do play the piano, so I do that for fun. Singing on the worship team, I guess, is kind of like a hobby. It's a ministry, of course, but I love to sing. I love to act, so I don't get a chance to. That's kind of something I haven't done in a while, but love acting, love performing when I get the chance to. So those are a few hobbies, I guess.
Oh, we have a few questions from that.
Oh, really? Oh, great.
What is your favorite book?
Oh, favorite book. Besides the Bible, got a caveat. Besides the Bible.
Yes, we do.
Gosh, favorite book. I think it might be The Martian. I really like The Martian. I feel like it was a book that was written specifically for me alone, because the main character is an engineer who's stranded on Mars. It's like near future where he's gotten on Mars. They think his team thinks he's dead, so they leave. And he's stranded there with what's left of the habitat. So the whole book is like him trying to survive. There's a movie made with Matt
I
Damon.
was going to say, didn't they
think
make
I've
a movie
seen
about
that.
Yeah, the movie's based on the book, but of course
Okay.
the book's always better. But
Well,
I hear the book's always better.
I want to know.
I've never read the book.
yeah. So anyway, that one was so much fun just because it like scratches the science fiction itch that I like science fiction,
Okay.
and it kind of scratches the engineering problem solving. And the main character is a very positive mindset. He always kind of has this sense of humor about himself. He never gets depressed or anything. So it just kind of matches like my vibe a little bit. So that's been one of my favorites in a long time. So, yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
neat.
Do you play any disc golf?
Disc golf, not really. I have played, but I don't play enough to be good at it because you use like a whole set of different discs.
Yeah, you have
So-
like a driver and a putter.
Yeah.
No, these are discs.
Why not? Now, if you just play with a frisbee, maybe they would let me do it. But I've thrown so many standard frisbees in Ultimate that like I'm best at that. So
Okay.
if I played that, I'd probably do better than actually using the disc golf stuff. So my best friend, his name's Steve. He loves disc golf. So sometimes when we get together, we'll play, but not that often. So
I feel like disc golf is on the rise, though. I see them in
Yeah.
all the
I see it a lot,
parks.
yeah.
People's
Yeah.
houses. Yeah.
Yeah, even I've got my Bear Lake Camp shirt on. I don't know if anybody can see it on the video, but like they just installed the disc golf goals, like those little things at the camp. So
I feel like they had those.
We had those back when
Yeah.
I
oh,
went.
they've been there. Okay, I didn't know how long they've been there, but I just
Yeah,
noticed
we had them back when I went.
Okay.
I played a couple times.
Oh yeah,
Wasn't very good.
I was horrible. Threw it in the woods. Oh yeah.
We looked
Okay.
for the coolest looking disc, not like the best functional one.
yeah, that's cool.
All good though. Bear Lake Camp. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
What is Bear Lake Camp?
So Bear Lake Camp is a camp on the edge of Bear Lake. So it's north of Columbia City. I guess it's actually in Noble County. It's been there a long time. So I went there as a camper. So
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it was there way before I was. It's probably started in like the 1950s. I think it goes way back. But I went as a kid, and my kids have all gone there when it's their time to be old enough to go to camp.
Yeah.
So they've done many years. And the fun part is this week while we're sitting here, 2 of my kids are at the camp because Lila is a counselor for the whole summer.
Yeah.
And Ava is a lifeguard for the whole summer. So they've been spending most of their weeks there. And then I'm actually on the board. So there's a leadership board for the camp. And a few years ago, after getting to know Ben through the worship team, and actually Ben's wife Carly works with my wife Heather because my wife's a nurse practitioner and Carly is a nurse. So they are paired up at the Parkview office that they work in. So that relationship kind of made it easier for Ben and I to get to know each other. So yeah, so I've been a part of the board for a little while now, and Monty Harlan is the one who runs it. So just trying to support them. They've already got a good thing going. The Lord's been blessing that camp for a lot of years. So I'm just trying to help where I can, not really trying to mess it up, but try to see where the Lord's leading. So getting through COVID was kind of crazy, being on the board of a church camp.
Okay.
Because we had to figure out, do we even have camp? If we
Yeah.
do, are they wearing masks? How do you wear a mask when you're camp? Doing camp stuff. So made it through that tough time, but it's been a blessing and a joy to be a part of it.
Yeah, that place is awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe Ben could get on. Not this summer. He's a little busy. But maybe,
Right, yeah.
maybe we'll get him on in his off
At the end
season.
of camp season, we'll
we'll
get
do a
Ben
camp
on.
recap with
There you
Ben.
go. You definitely should. He's a very interesting dude, so he'd be a good
That'd be
podcast
fun.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's touch into your growing up.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up here. What did faith look like for you growing up, and then how has that kind of strengthened as you've gotten older?
Sure. Yeah. My family, when my mom and dad got married, they decided to go to First Church of God. So when First Church of God was on Main Street, where they were across from Dairy Queen, that's where they went. So that's the church I grew up in. I remember really vaguely getting saved when I was a pretty young kid, so I'm sure a lot of people on your podcast have some have that background, others don't, but like I remember exactly the room where I was. It was the fellowship hall of the church, and there was some children's programming, and they gave a gospel message, and I responded, and they told my parents, and my parents are pretty low key, so they were like, okay, sounds good, not a huge deal. But then just like growing up in the church, and my parents were very much like every Sunday kind of people. Like actually for Bear Lake Camp when I was a kid, it was it's pretty expensive sometimes. It depends on your family of sending a kid for a full week of camp. And my parents were by no means well off. My dad worked in a factory. My mom stayed home with us. Didn't have a ton of money. But the church would scholarship kids based on their attendance on Sunday mornings. So like if you came to Sunday school and all that, then they would give you like a certain amount off.
Huh.
And if you had at least 50 weeks where you were at church, then they would 100% scholarship it. And no problem. We hit the 50 weeks out of 52 easily.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, we were there every week.
Go on vacation.
No. Yeah. Well, they didn't have a ton of money for vacations. So some of our vacations were like a 1 or 2 nighter kind of thing. So it wasn't a big deal back then. But yeah, so so we were there a lot, was a part of a lot of the programming. My faith just grew as I got older. Some really great times when I was in the youth group age, like junior high, high school, because we had, I discovered Bible quizzing. So I became a Bible quizzer through our church. And back at that time, that was a really vibrant part of the youth ministry. Sometimes youth group would have hardly, like you'd show up to youth group and it would be the same people you saw at Bible quizzing. Like there was no difference really back then. And then also I learned how to act a little bit. I tried to because they had a drama group called Altered. And so Altered was a great thing for me to be a part of, to just dig in deeper to like the dramatic arts and creative arts and music. Sometimes people would sing, but we did lots of acting and kind of skits and mimes and stuff like that. So those were times where it just really fed my faith through high school. And then just kind of from there, just kept it with me the whole way. So I don't think I ever really had any time of like walking away from the faith or really, serious doubts or anything, but just tried to always react to the truth that I knew, which is like, if God is real and I know he's real, then he's worth following, and he's blessed me in so many ways that it's just been a joy to keep serving him. So yeah, that's the basic story, I guess.
Oh, we've heard that story a lot, but it's great to hear.
God is good, right? Like, it's a good thing. Yeah.
Honestly, we don't want to hear I fell off and did that. Like, we're glad.
Yeah. It's better to stick.
Yeah. More joy in that way, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And through that, you've served in a multitude of different areas. You on the worship team. First Church Academy, am I mistaken?
Yeah, you're not mistaken.
Yeah, you want to touch on a little bit of that?
Sure. Yeah, there was... So, when I was in Lexington... was under some Sunday school classes and small groups of people that were great teachers, and toward the end of our time there was some transitions, and so I started leading the small group that we had there, just kind of getting my feet wet, and we had a really vibrant, active small group that was just great to be a part of. It was a home group, basically. We did lots of stuff. We'd go on vacation together and everything. So I learned some teaching skills, and then when I came to Columbia City, we ended up joining a small group that was pretty big, and when they were ready to split into two, Jeremy was the host of that group at the time, and he was like, well, anybody in this group, and it was a big group of people, was like, anybody here that thinks they might be willing to teach or has a gift of teaching, just let me know, and then we'll figure out how we want to split it up. And so I told Jeremy, I was like, hey, I can teach. I taught a little bit at my old church, and I enjoy it. So I just letting him know. And then a few weeks later, I talked to him again, and I was like, well, how many people did you get? Like, how many people were willing to teach? And he's like, oh, just you. So you're in. Oh, okay. That's how this goes. So we split off, and then for 8 years in a row, I was a Sunday morning small group leader for that group. So it was Heather and I were the teachers, and then Jeremy and Maureen were the hosts. And so with the combination of the four of us, we had a group continuously, basically for 8 years, where we just kind of people our age, but all different ages were allowed to come, of course. And so we just had a great time with that. And so when Brandon Holler was associate pastor at our church, he was talking about doing a course a little more intentional, a little more like kind of an entry level, like a class you would take in college, like a Old Testament survey or a New Testament survey sort of thing. And so he asked me if I'd be willing to help out, and I was like, well, sure, I'd be willing to help. And so we got ready to get going on that, and he was like, well, come meet me at this time. We'll do some prep. And I was like, great. And so I show up, and I'm like looking around, kind of similar story of like, well, who else is helping? Like, who else did you ask? He's like, oh, just you. Oh, great. Okay. I didn't realize it was going to be that.
Pretty common, huh?
Yeah, it keeps happening to me. I think I'm going to be part of a group, and it's just one person and me. So it's like, okay. So he did all the hard work, by the way. So he, of course, he was full-time ministry every day. So he would create all the slides and get everything together. We would meet at Panda Express in Warsaw, because he would drive to work closer to where I worked, and we'd meet at the Panda Express for lunch. We'd go over every week with the material. I'd give him some advice on like, hey, we should do this differently or whatever, but most of it was his. And then we would kind of team teach it. So we'd sit at the front of the room, and he'd do a chunk, I'd do a chunk. And so he was very generous, because he's an amazing teacher, of course, and so very generous to give me an opportunity to be a part of that. And it was 6 weeks times 4, because there were like 4 different chunks of it. So It was a good chunk of the year. And then we ended up doing that 4 years together. And then I did it for a year after he had moved on to where the Lord called him. So five years in a row, I was a part of First Church Academy. And just the best part of it was the people in the class. Like, the people that come always are what makes it interesting, because their questions and their perspective like changes the way we teach it and the way. And every time I teach it, it's like I learn more about it, and I dive in deeper to some aspect. Awesome. So such a joy. We might bring it back again sometime. I mean, I talked to Brad about it and try to see if the time is right, but so far it hasn't really seemed like the thing to do just yet. But I do love teaching and try to use that gift that I believe it's just all the Lord giving me the ability to do it. So yeah.
And then worship team.
Oh yeah.
How did that start with you?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I did some of the drama stuff, but I was never a soloist. I was in some kids choirs and stuff in school. And so if you said, hey, can you sing? I'd be like, well, I mean, I can sing in a choir, but that's like all I can do. And didn't really feel like I was that good of a singer. And when I went to college at Rose Holman, they had a drama club. And of course, I loved acting. So we did a fall play, and plays are great because you're just talking, right? So I did that, had a small part. And then we got later in the year, there was a musical. And literally on the day when the tryouts were, I was up around there and I started to leave. And one of my friends was like, where are you going? And I was like, well, I can't really sing. So I don't think I'm going to be in the musical. And he was like, well, you can at least try out. Like, why don't you just try out? It's so much fun. And he had been there. He was older than me. So he's like, oh, it's so much fun. You got to do it. And I was like, okay, fine. So against my better judgment, I went ahead and auditioned. And they were like, oh, sure, you can sing. So I was like, oh, great. Okay, I guess I didn't know that. So I've never been professionally trained or anything. I just have jumped into it in that way. So I ended up doing a lot more singing at Rose Holman through the different additional years of being in it. And so then I got a lot more comfortable with solos because I had roles where I would sing solos and stuff. So the Lord kind of made me more comfortable with that. And then later, much later, after we moved back to Columbia City, I didn't start on the worship team. We had other things going on. I was teaching the small group and just trying to raise kids, and life's busy, Yeah. So there just happened to be a day when they did one of those ministry fairs, and Heather was already on the worship team playing the guitar. And she said, hey, Holly was our worship pastor at this point. And she was like, Holly said they need more guy vocalists. You could try it. And I was like, okay, well, if they have a need, then, I wouldn't mind helping where they have a need. So that's how it started for me, was just signing up and saying, hey, Holly, here's what I know how to do. And there's lots of stuff I don't know how to do. I couldn't sing harmonies at all. So I had to kind of teach myself how to sing in harmony when someone else is leading. And so again, it's totally the Lord's blessing that I'm any good at. And I always tell Holly to this day, it's like, you won't offend me if you tell me, hey, I don't need you, or, whatever. Like, it's all good. Like, this is not something I have to do, but I love doing it anyway. Like, it's a joy to me to do. So, but if the Lord wants me to do something else, that's fine too.
Let me guess. Were you the only person that signed up that day as well?
That is a good question. It might have been the only. I think it might have been.
I'd put money on it.
Yeah, I would assume so.
I think you're right. Yeah, there were some other new people, but no guys. I think I was the only guy. So, yeah, gosh, the Lord just keeps working that way.
Yeah.
So you talked about how you did Bible quizzing growing up. Could you tell us about your involvement with that now?
Yeah. So just so people know what it is, like a lot of people when they hear Bible quizzing, they think like Jeopardy, where you have to be some like savant and know
That's
everything.
what I think.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
That's not true. You don't have to be super duper smart, because we're not just pulling people. They don't just pull people and ask them questions. It's actually a Bible study. So it's like a Bible study on steroids, where the Bible quiz coach teaches you about a chapter of the Bible, and then you quiz on it. And then throughout the school year, you learn all the chapters of a book. So this year we've been doing Acts, 28 chapters. So it's a pretty big book.
Yeah.
But when I was in it, I was in it 6 years in a row, and I totally did not have any clue what the Lord was doing by putting me through that process of it's like education, because I was having so much fun doing it that it didn't seem like work at all. So like the first year when I was a seventh grader, I was so nervous. I was so shy. I was very shy, and I didn't say a word. Like the entire year of practices on Sundays when we'd meet, I didn't jump and answer a single question. Like that's how shy I was, even with my own team. And the coach would like try to like draw it out of me. He's like, Ryan, I know you know some of this. Why aren't you jumping? And it's like, I was so shy. But by the end of that year, we had the big final competition, and somehow the competitive switch just flipped in me of like, oh wait, I can do this. And so the end of that year, I actually did well as a junior high person. And then from then on, the next 5 years, I was just like completely on fire for like trying to do the best I can and really wanting to give it my all. And so, like 1 year you do John, 1 year you do Luke, 1 year you do Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon, which are all short books. Yeah, it sounds like a lot, right? But they're all short books, so you actually can get through those faster than you get through Acts, right? So as a quizzer, having all that Bible knowledge in my head, like it never really goes away. There's some Bible memorization as a part of it, but that's not most of the questions are just general questions. So learning all that, and then the year after, they needed somebody to take over the Churches of God General Conference running of the program. So a bunch of churches and Churches of God do this program. And at the end of the year, there's a midpoint where everyone gets together, and then there's the end of the year where they all get together. So me and Ryan Hinman together took on the directorship of that. So for 10 years, he and I were the directors. So we were the ones asking the questions, at the competitions and organizing the events. So it taught me a lot about how to organize big events. And in a way, it was like being a youth leader in some ways, because it's a youth program. And then after we finished that, the Lord called us into other things. And then just a few years ago became a Bible quiz coach for our church. And my kids have all been a part of it now too. So for 3 or 4 years, this is the 4th year, I think. Maybe 3, that we've been the coaches for our team. And that's a whole different experience because now it's week to week, I'm teaching them. So a lot of that teaching gift that I was able to exercise in First Church Academy, now I'm using it every single week with the Bible quizzers. We have between 10 and 25 kids depending on the year. And so it's just been great to have an outlet for that teaching. And it's different when you're teaching a 6th grader up to a 12th grader because you're trying to make it interesting, something that they would all understand, and it's different than teaching adults too. So it's been a good challenge.
Do you guys meet all year round?
We take about 3 or 4 months off. So our big final competition is at the end of this month in July, and then we don't start up until like October, November, something like that. So there's kind of a time off there.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you get approached or asked to be the coach for First Church?
Yeah, for First Church, a lot of people knew I had done it before as the director of the whole program. They knew I was a quizzer. And then Lila was a quizzer before I was a coach. So she was on the team when Troy and Kara Franks were the coaches of it. And they had their kids in it. And so when their kids had all graduated, then it was kind of like a natural handover point. And that's kind of how it's always been with First Church. It's like Marla and Gary Chappell were the coaches when their kids were in it, and that sort of thing. It kind of moves along. So it was just something we talked to Luke Deal about, of like, hey, if this is an opportunity, we'd be willing to do it. And then when the Franks were done, then we were able to jump in. So
yeah, that's cool. Get to connect with your kids as well as teach the gospel, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's been great.
Let's get I got a little bit of a deeper question for you.
Sure.
Throughout a lot of your stories, you've been very obedient. I have heard a common theme of just saying yes and obeying, and then being a good leader as well. I guess what are like qualities or aspects of being obedient and then also being a good leader?
Okay. Yeah, good question. I'm first of all, I'm a really big fan of Christian music, and I have been since I was in junior high and stuff. So one of my favorite bands is Petra, old school, right? And one of their songs is called "I Am Available." I think maybe the song's just called "Available," but the chorus sings about being available to the Lord. And that's always been something that's really just soaked into my heart, that like obedience a lot of times is saying yes, because if you say, "You're my Savior, you're my Lord," I think in front of the church, a lot of times we'll hear people talking to little kids of like, he's the boss of your life, he's the leader of your life. That if he's the commander and I'm the infantry soldier, then you don't really just get to pick and choose the commands that you want to obey, right? Like that would be a terrible military. If you just say, I don't think so. So when he's my Lord, then I say, yes, Lord, So there's a place in the Bible where somebody says, no, Lord. And it's like that comment is like, you can't ever say that because
it's not good.
It's
don't do that.
No, you can't say no, Lord, because then he's not your Lord if you're saying no. So, so it's something that like just the availability is there. And even in the times when they asked Ryan and I to be in charge of the Bible quizzing thing for the denomination, it was like, I didn't feel capable. I was like 19 years old. I felt like I was under-equipped, too young, but like it felt like the Lord really wanted me to do it, and I was like, I think I'm going to say yes to this. And so a lot of times it can be scary or it can be kind of out in the unknown, but it's like if you got to say yes to these things if it's the Lord doing it, and so learning how to discern His voice is key in that. So so that's part of it, and then I think for just being available is a huge thing, because then he'll give you everything you need, and it's usually better if you don't know what you're doing because then our weakness highlights God's strength. So Paul talks about things that are foolish to the world, and I think it pleases God to show the world that he doesn't have to have rabbinical scholars that are following Jesus. He can use fishermen, he can use tax collectors, he can use the women that follow Jesus and were part of his ministry. It's like, it doesn't make sense in the world's eyes, but that highlights who God is even more. So if we can say yes to things that he's asking us to do, and it's abundantly apparent that we're not really the world's experts, then it just shines a light on him even more. So sometimes leadership is that way too. So like I've been blessed to be an elder of the church and just have different spots where I can lead. And for me, it's not really that much different because the leaders are still the servants, So like he who desires to be first will be last and last will be first. So in Christianity, there's no like I'm on the top of the mountain, I'm the most important person kind of leader. It's completely different because Jesus washed his disciples' feet, and that's the example for us. So even saying yes to leadership is still saying yes to sacrifice, still saying yes to humility, not getting your own way. Just because you're in a leadership position doesn't mean everything has to be done the way you want it to be. There's still seeking the Lord's wisdom, seeking the consensus of other leaders, and a lot of what we do in the church is through leadership teams and groups of people. So, so those are some things that the Lord has taught me. Is just when I think I want my own way, it's usually better to just let go of that and then see where He's leading and try to follow Him there.
Yeah, I mean, we're told our hearts are wicked, so if we throw all our trust into Him, it turns out a lot better.
Oh yeah. Can't follow your own way because you're likely to mess it up. So.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Has it ever been difficult to maybe jump into something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because everything we do to serve is a sacrifice. So there's always kind of like if I'm doing one ministry, I'm not doing a different ministry. Or if I'm, when I became an elder, I eventually had to let go of the Sunday morning teaching. So I stopped teaching that class. And so there's some pain in like giving up things that you had already grown attached to. If the Lord decided I didn't need to be on the worship team, that would be tough because I've grown to really love the people on the team and love seeing God's people through that seat on the bus, like seeing what it's like to be on the worship team. So it's hard in that way, just in sacrificing. It's hard just every time I have to go away from home to go to a meeting, go to any kind of church meeting. I never want my kids to grow up and say, "Oh, my dad was a Christian. Yeah, he was gone all the time." It's like I got to be present for them too. And then it's hard sometimes too because not everything is easy. Like there's hard transitions. I've been a part of in the leadership team when we had to transition hard things like daycare at the church that we don't have anymore, and different transitions of pastors can be hard behind the scenes to figure out. Just walking through the situations with them of like figuring out where the Lord's calling them. So things like that, it's like it's kind of supposed to be hard because that's why you need the Lord. Like you need Him to guide you, and even as a leader, it's not like we have all the answers. It's always seeking His leading. So it's hard to figure that out sometimes because it's not always on day one that everyone's like, "Oh yeah, I prayed last night and He told us all the exact same thing." Sometimes it's like, no, it takes a little more time, but to kind of get everyone on the same page. So yeah,
that's awesome. I love that answer. We're definitely clipping that. That's going to be our post for you.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I'm probably giving like way too long answers. So if you need me to tighten it up,
you're
just
doing
tell
great.
me.
Yeah. Switch directions.
Yeah.
Rob Bergman, you're related to him.
This is true.
How so?
Yeah. Okay. So our wives are sisters. So that's the fastest way to say it. So Heather is my wife. Rachel is his wife. They both used to have the last name Couch. So Heather Couch and Rachel Couch. Yeah, just like we're sitting on a couch. Yeah. Yeah, easy to remember. So they...
I'm so sorry.
You didn't expect that, did you?
I expected it.
That was just dumb.
Yeah, so Rob and I are connected in that way. So like back in the olden days when we were in high school, and I'd go over to Heather's house to hang out with Heather, and occasionally Rob would show up. He would be there because Rachel is 3 years younger than Heather, and so I think Rob is I think he's the same class. So Rob's 3 years younger than me. So Heather and I started dating before they did. But then once they started dating, then I got to know Rob a little bit through just being around the same family activities. So we'd be at family Christmases and all that kind of stuff. And so he's been so much fun to get to know over the years. And it's, changes over time because now we're got kids and can kind of commiserate about that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Okay. And your wife went to Asbury, and so did they.
Yes.
Was that because of her then, or
sort of, yeah. Heather and Rachel used to go to a different church. They didn't start coming to our church until Heather and I started dating, or at least until I was pursuing her. It took me most of a year to convince her to actually date me. So,
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. So
We're gonna need
little
to
bit
hear
of a
that
story
soon.
there. But they went to a different church. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was in Columbia City. It was a
Okay.
very small church. They were the only youth in it, pretty much. But their pastor of their church went to Asbury, so he was a positive influence for them
Okay.
about what Asbury's like, and told them about it. And Asbury is very well connected to the Methodist Church, and their old church was a Methodist church, so they had that connection. So, but once Heather went there, then Rachel had visited and saw that it was a cool place to be, and so that's partly why she went there. Yeah.
I would argue, and Rob, we had Rob on. He didn't
Yeah.
admit this. He said he came to the conclusion of going to Asbury on his own. I think there's a little bit of an influence.
I'm not going to dispute that. Yeah. Rob tells the truth, so if he said it, it must be. It must be.
Yeah. Now rewind. What's that story of getting your wife to date you for a year?
Yeah, it's kind of a it's a cute story in some ways. So the funny part to me is that when she first moved to my school, she and I had a lot in common. Like, she was a very good student at her old school, so she was kind of top of the heap. And then when she got to our school, that was kind of my role in the class. So we kind of, oh no, who's gonna be? And then we're talking, and she's like, "Oh, I play the piano," and I was like, "Well, I play the piano." So we both played the piano, and so we would support each other in some of the piano stuff. But the story goes, from her mom told me, that she would go home in 5th grade and say, "Mom, I can't stand that kid. I can't stand Ryan. He's driving me nuts. He got his best grade, whatever." And then one day she went home. She's like, "He even plays the piano too." And she's very upset about this. And then like a couple more weeks later, she goes home and tells her mom, "Mom, I think someday I might marry Ryan Ward."
There you go.
So she said that in 5th
Yeah.
grade.
Okay.
It's like a prophecy that eventually came. But here's the big problem is, she forgot all about that. And then when were... Yeah, so many years passed, and so we get into high school. I'm doing cross country every year. That's my sport, is cross country, and she does track and cheerleading. So she's a cheerleader. I'm a nerdy kid, right? So she shows up out of nowhere, like just walks up to practice in the summertime of right before our junior year, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm joining cross country. My track coach told me it'd be good for my endurance." She was more of a sprinter.
Yeah.
And as soon as she walked up, in my head, I'm like, "This is my chance. I have to make the most of this chance." So it took me most of the season, but I finally asked her out, and she said yes. Then I fumbled the ball completely because I didn't know what to do next, so we never actually went on a date. It was terrible, yeah. Man, I almost screwed it up so early.
How do you regain from that?
It was a mess. It was a mess. I didn't know what I was doing. I never really dated anybody before that, so I didn't have much of a clue about how to do this thing. So what I did know was that she was a Christian, and we were both Christians. And so I would say, "Hey, why don't you come to my church? I'll pick you up." So I would go drive to her house on Sunday mornings, pick her up, bring her to our church, take her to Sunday school, go to church, drive her back home. As soon as we got in the driveway, like as soon as the car came to mostly a stop, she'd be like, doors open, she's right out of there.
Oh,
She didn't
geez.
want that awkward time frame of like saying goodbye and whatever move I would make. But so she was not interested in the lovey-dovey kind of stuff. So it was like, he's a good friend and all that, and he's bringing me to his church. We actually went to Mr. Sittler's class back
Wow.
then. Jim Sittler.
We need to
Is
get him on.
Mr.
You
Sittler
gotta
a
get him on.
matchmaker?
No, he wasn't interested in anything like that. But he was just
Okay.
a really awesome Sunday school teacher for high
for
school
sure.
age, and he was also a biology teacher at school. So Heather had taken his classes. So she loved his class. She loved the church. And so that was like a standing date, quote unquote, that like every week I would come and pick her up. So it gave us a chance to talk. Then I started helping her with her homework. So it took me most of like, I don't want to make the story too long, but it got to semi-formal, and I was like, okay, I gotta go for this. Do you want to go to semi-formal? She said no. She said no, not going. She went with somebody else.
Oh.
I thought it was over. It was like cross country's over now. I tried everything I could possibly try, and it's over now.
So he joined track.
That's a good idea. I should have done that. No, we still stayed in touch. We talked on the phone, and when it got close
Okay.
to prom, we were talking as friends, and she kind of hinted around that I should ask her to prom. So,
There you go.
So I asked her, and so then from then on, we were dating officially. So junior prom was actually our first date. So yeah, we got
But
to
she
junior
said
prom.
yes months before.
Yeah. No, I know. It was a roller coaster for sure. It was a roller coaster, but then we were solid after that. So yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that question about Rob is I think Christian community is very important. It's kind of why we do this.
Yeah.
What's I don't know, what's your thoughts on Christian community and how it's impacted your life?
Yeah. I think Christian community is important just to let us all know that we're not alone. Like, it's not easy to be a Christian in the culture we live in today.
Yeah.
And there's so many times as an adult where it's just like, wow, how can the world be heading this direction? Or why is this the new normal? And it's just so hard to like resist the temptations of that and like to fight back. You okay there? Yeah. Okay. To resist those temptations. And so like with Christian community, you feel like I'm not the only one. Like there's other people that you know, that you respect and that you look up to and you look sideways to, peers. Everybody is like, we're all in this together. And that is so important. And then just from the standpoint of people that are helping you raise your kids, people that are helping you stay on the straight and narrow. So I know Seth mentioned the mentoring that we've done. That's been really good for me as well, just to have someone to stop and pray with. And we've had several different small groups. We've had that Sunday morning group that I mentioned. We've had home groups. We just recently had a group that was a home group that we just disbanded recently. And just got a text last night to go watch the Sound of Freedom movie with the same group of people, you know? So it's like we're still really good friends. So that is so important just to like make an impact on the world. Like if it wasn't for Christian community, I wouldn't be making very much of an impact. Like I'm not... are we really going to organize mission trips and we're really going to like do special events like Fall Fest when it's just me alone? Can't do it. But when it's us together, we can do so much more together. So, so those are just some things about Christian community that like you just really, again, you can't really say no, Lord, when it comes to Christian community. You can't just say, I'd rather be a loner. You know, it's like there's no option. Like you can't do what he wants you to do and do it by yourself. So you just have to be a part of that community.
Yeah, and it even keeps you rooted, keeps you from straying away.
Yeah.
Even that accountability aspect. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. Got anything?
What are you currently working? Like you said, you were doing the Bible in a year, right?
Yeah.
What book of the Bible are you on right now, or what area are you in?
Yeah. So I'm doing the Bible reading plan that goes along with the Bible recap. So if people are listening to this as a podcast, they've probably at some point seen the Bible recap. I do recommend that. It's done by Tara Lee Cobble. She's excellent. She's a great Bible teacher, and she does a podcast every single day about the reading of the day. And so it's only like 6 or 7 minutes usually. And that whole track is on a chronological reading plan. So instead of like beginning and end of the Bible, it's like in the timeline, where is it? So when you're reading, in 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel about David, then you'll pop over and do a day in the Psalms and read some of the Psalms he wrote. I'm doing the Divided Kingdom right now, so I'm reading 2 Kings, I think I'm in right now. So 2 Kings is all about the different kings, and most of them were terrible. But then mostly terrible. Yeah. That's a fact. Yeah, I remember teaching in First Church Academy, we used to say, okay, the Northern Kingdom, the Southern Kingdom, how many in the Northern Kingdom were good, and how many in the Southern Kingdom were good? Northern Kingdom, the number is 0 good. And in the Southern Kingdom, only 2 of like this long line were really very good. So, and then while I'm reading that, it pops over to some of the prophets that are active during that time. So I just read Isaiah 5-8 today, chapters 5-8, because Isaiah was active during that time of the divided kingdom. So yeah, it's a good way to do it. I've never done it. I've never done the Bible in a year. This is my first time in my life.
Okay.
I've read the whole Bible before, but never like intentionally in 1 year like
Have
this.
you front to back the Bible then?
Just
Front to
once
back?
before,
Yeah.
like I did when I was younger, like through college, my college years, I kind of did a long journey where, because reading is my favorite hobby, I made a promise to myself that before I read anything for fun, I'll read at least one chapter of the Bible. And that time I did it just front to back. So I eventually made it through the whole Bible, but it was fairly disjointed over a longer period of time. And
It's a big book.
it's a sizable book. Yeah. So this is the first time I've ever done it all in 1 year.
Okay.
Yep.
What's some of the hardest scripture that you've read, or some of the things that are most challenging?
Let's see. That's a good question. I think the hardest scriptures, I mean, in one sense, like none of it's really that hard, because if you are approaching it from the standpoint of a learner, he's the rabbi, I'm the student, he's the Lord of the universe, and he knows everything. So like I can trust him on everything. Then there's nothing really that hard, because I know he's to be trusted. But there are things that I think are harder to live with and to talk about, because our culture keeps changing.
Yeah.
And so there are things that our culture believes are right, and they're not right. And so it gets harder and harder to declare biblical truth in any forum, even inside the walls of a church sometimes. So I think those are the hardest things where, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, it wouldn't have been as hard, but now it is, dealing with just the issues of the day, social issues, lots of things. So I think those become hard because we may not have any problem believing what the Lord says is true, but it's just harder and harder to share it in a way that's meaningful, and to find the balance of like, I don't want to just tick people off immediately, but I also don't want to water down the truth and basically be telling a lie. So I think it's the application that becomes hard, not the passage.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite passage from the Bible? Like one specific story or anything like that?
Yeah, I do. So when I was a Bible quizzer in 7th grade and I was doing horrible and knew nothing, our Bible quiz coach, Stan Owen was his name.
Shout out Stan.
Yeah, Stan. Hope you're listening to the podcast at some point. Yeah, he's a pastor. He's not in our. He's at Syracuse Church, but yeah, there's no chance. No chance. Yeah.
We'll send it to him. We'll find his Facebook or something.
I remember you, Stan and Cindy. Thank you for your faithfulness. Yes. So Stan told us one day. So first of all, we did Romans the year that I was terrible. So that's probably not a great first book. It's a fairly complex theological kind of book for a 7th grader. But when we got to chapter 12, he said, hey guys, if you only memorize one verse this whole year of quizzing, this is the one. And he was talking about Romans 12:2. So me being a rule follower and an obedient kid, I was like, well, I guess that's the one I'm memorizing. So
that was easy.
So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And that's all I had to do. So I memorized that one single verse. And there's like 100 that you're allowed to memorize that are like legitimate questions. And I only memorized that one. And that year at the national competition, when the light switch turned on, I got like 5 questions right just from that one verse, because they would ask a question and the answer was found in that verse. So it was further just like a God thing of like, he kind of like gave me what I needed, in the sense of like the only thing I knew really well, he like gave me lots of questions on that. And Romans 12:2, you probably already know it if you're watching, but do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So that's what I memorized way back then, and it's never left me, and it's something that has become something that I just continually keep coming back to, because the world only gets worse and worse, and the longer we're in it, the more tempting it is to conform to it. And there are temptations now in my 40s that are different than the temptations I had in my 20s. And so not conforming to the pattern of the world is something that never gets old, and transforming our minds so that we can know what God's will is so important and critical. So that one verse has just stuck with me my whole life. Yeah,
that's big time.
Yeah.
Especially since 7th grade. That kind of a area in your life where maybe people are making some bad decisions, and being able to be rooted in that is very important.
Yeah.
So,
I went to a secular college, so you're away from your family. Nobody I knew from my high school went to college, so it was a time where a lot of people struggle, and it's hard when you're away from your support systems and all that. But trying to keep those things that I knew were true in my life through that time was critical. So
yeah, for sure. We got our final question for you.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what it is by chance?
I heard if it's the same one that Seth got.
Same one every time.
All right.
Same every time. And you've gone on a few trips in your lifetime.
I have,
I know you go with the Freemans a lot. And
Yep. Yeah.
Some things. So you have some experience. So I'm excited to hear this. If you're new here, our final question is your dream trip, and there's no limitations financially, distance, whatever.
Yeah. Whew, that's a hard one because I feel like I'm old enough that I've already done a lot of trips that felt like dream trips. Like,
Okay.
like one of my favorites that we have already been on is with my wife. We were able to go to Switzerland together. I used to go there for work. So Zimmer has a facility in Switzerland, and being able to go there for work, I was like, I got to bring my wife here. So in 2012, we traveled together and went to this mountain village called Zermatt. It's at the base of the Matterhorn. So if you've heard of the Matterhorn mountain, just a cool village, no cars in the village. It's a ski town.
Nice.
Yeah, there's no cars. So like you have to get there by train and then you walk everywhere or ski. You can ski right in most places. I could not ski because that was during the time when I had torn my ACL. Didn't even know it.
Dude, she was probably so mad about that.
We've never skied,
Oh,
so
okay.
she didn't. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's not a big skier, so she didn't care too much. But
Thank goodness.
I knew something was wrong with my knee, but I didn't know what, so I hadn't diagnosed it yet. But I was like, I better not try any skiing. It's not gonna work. I barely turn the corner in the hallway and make it around the corner without hurting myself. So, yeah. So we were there, and that was a kind of place of just like you're looking at these Swiss buildings with like a foot of snow on them, and you're just like, pinch me, this is amazing. So like I love to do vacations with my wife, and we've been different places. So I guess it would probably be someplace that she would enjoy going just as much as I would, because she tends to be a little more adventurous. Like she wants to see things and do things and on like kind of bucket list kind of things.
Okay.
And I'm more like, I've already seen enough of the world. I could just have a beach vacation and be happy. But I like when she's happy, and I do like doing things with her. So it would probably be some sort of vacation with her. And I've been to a lot of the continents of the world, but I've never been to Australia. So maybe if I had to pick a place, I know it's like officially part of the continent, but it's not part of the landmass, but New Zealand would be really cool. After the Lord of the Rings movies and all the landscapes and everything, I'd love to go to New Zealand and just kind of see what nature looks like there. So that's my answer.
That's a good answer. And just you and your wife, or
I think so. Yeah.
no kids?
I mean,
No.
well, not really.
Sorry.
That just
You guys ain't going.
they'll go on their own trips. You know, they're
Okay.
getting old enough. They're gonna be doing their own thing, and we've taken them a lot of places. We've taken them plenty of spots.
And I
so.
would bet a lot of money that is not their dream vacation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, who knows? They may want to
Yeah.
go somewhere totally different. So
Yeah.
we'll let them fulfill their own dreams.
There you
in
go.
their own time. So
that's awesome. Well, Ryan, we appreciate you coming on. We loved hearing about you and some of your insight.
Yeah, thanks,
do you have
guys.
any closing thoughts? Or
no, I just really appreciate what you guys do. I think it's fantastic. I love our church. Obviously, I wouldn't still be here if I didn't just love serving, and it just really is kind of my church in the sense that like it's where God's called me and my family, and just loving to serve in whatever way we can. So yeah, all glory to God.
yeah, feels like home at church, and we just want to. I mean, home's where your family is, so we're trying to tighten up our family.
Yeah.
So yeah, appreciate you guys for listening, watching. Ryan, do you want to maybe call out someone to come on next? I know.
Ooh.
Who's next?
Ooh, yes. I mean, we talked about Ben already, so
Okay.
Ben could definitely do after.
Yeah,
after
we
it's time.
will not bother him.
It's way too early now. Yeah. Gosh, I don't know. There's so many people that like that you could ask. Like
know.
I saw the list of them, and some of those folks are people I would mention, but
Yeah.
I don't even know. I just feel like there's so many. Like you can't go wrong. Like you could go almost anybody. Oh, I did think of somebody because I figured you would ask me.
You said Sittler.
Sittler would be a good one too.
Okay.
I just have loved getting to know David, and I don't remember his last name off the top of my head, but David gave us testimony in church when we had 3 different people give testimony in person, and he was the one that talked about his time in prison and some of the different things that he'd been through. So if you guys haven't talked to him, I think he would be just a really cool perspective. He came to our prayer and worship class that we did on Sunday nights when Holly and a few of us, Seth was included, taught this Sunday night class, and he came to it. And his insights were so cool just to hear his perspective on, not like me, like growing up in the church the whole time, but like coming at it from a totally different angle. I think I love seeing the way he worships, and just that he is like completely all in. Like it doesn't matter what song we picked, he's like all in on whatever song it is. And I can see his heart in that. So yeah.
Love that. We'll do it.
Yeah. Get
Sweet.
him on.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching, listening, wherever you view. If you could maybe leave some feedback, we'd love to hear it. It's a great way to grow. And we will see you next week. Peace.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.